We are here to enforce unity and love, but also to promote healthy dialogue and provide room for disagreement amongst numerous types of belief systems. According to the Oxford Dictionary, an a priori belief is a belief relating to or denoting reasoning or knowledge which proceeds from theoretical deduction rather than from observation or experience, or a belief that in a way is based on a theoretical deduction rather than empirical observation. I urge you to question yourself. Faith is something that we all understand to be related to God in some way, but truly, faith can be found in a lot of times within the places you would least expect it. An atheist is faithful perhaps in his belief of no God. This person holds true to that, and a Christian is faithful in his dedication to Jesus Christ. He too is devout to this. We wanted to thank all of you participants today for coming, including the speakers, and thank you for all for joining us this evening and challenging these a priori beliefs. Um, So I want to hand it off to Kelsey to introduce the speakers and tell us a little bit about how this afternoon is going to look like in terms of the setup for everybody speaking, and we will have a question and answer at the end. Kelsey,
You mute.
you're muted.
As soon as I think I've got it. Hello, for those who don't know me, I'm Kelsey McCutcheon. As I said to some of our people earlier, I would consider myself to be agnostic. I don't follow any one religion, but I do believe in the importance of spirituality and faith in life. But what is most important is our ability to disagree, to question, and to learn. I also know the importance of understanding the ties that bind us outside of our differences. And so I'm going to post the agenda into the chat just so you can get an idea of how this discussion is kind of going to go. The agenda is a little bit loose. We do want to leave it open to a natural flowing discussion, but if we need to move it along, we do have that to fall back on.
Yes.
So we're going to start by letting our speakers introduce themselves. I'll go through the list we have so you can know who's speaking first. And they're going to explain a little bit about how they came to belong to their faith group or where they are now for those who are not affiliated with one, and express what aspects of other faith groups they would like to discuss, what kind of topics they'd like to cover. And then from there, we'll pretty much follow the agenda and let the discussion flow from there. And then after that, we will open it up to questions from the audience. So firstly, we would like to present Mohammed Sharif. Is it Sharif or Sarif?
That's correct. Yeah, Muhammad Sharif. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Yep, we can hear you.
Yeah. So my name is Muhammad Sharif, and I am representing Islam. I'm a college student. I was born in Kenya, and I grew up in America, so I do definitely understand, the different dynamics of religion and secularism, and also just tradition and how it varies depending on what location you're at. So I definitely will just try to talk about that. I'm looking forward to what everyone. I'm sorry. Wherever anyone wants to talk about, really, I want this to be a meaningful dialogue because I think it's very important to create a space for people to have these conversations because they're not being have in other areas. So just feel free to ask any questions. Don't be shy.
Awesome. Thank you. Next up, we'll introduce Dr. Weaver.
Hi, Kelsey. Thank you for having me once again, and I really appreciate the spirit of these discussions, and it's really encouraging to hear what's going on at your campus and the kind of conversations that you're facilitating.
You good?
And so it's quite important, and I really appreciate the opportunity to share. I'm a Baptist pastor, so I'm speaking from the Christian tradition. And I'll be sharing a little bit when I have opportunity about where Baptists came from and maybe where you would like them to go back to. But anyway, we'll talk about that in just a a few moments, and I'll look forward to any questions, and also interested in discussing commonalities as well as the differences between the faith traditions that each of us represent, and letting the students and all those who participate have the opportunity to see and hear those. So I think that's very healthy. I appreciate what Mr. Buckley said a few moments ago. This is not just a kumbaya type moment. We want to truly express our sincerely held beliefs, but do so in a winsome and a loving way and in a kind way. And I think those who hold to various religious, I've heard someone say that those who hold to various religious positions are sometimes the last people who can have an honest disagreement in our society today, where we can say, hey, we actually do disagree about what we think the truth is, but what is also often missing, of course, is a winsomeness in that discussion. And so hopefully we're going to be able to have those disagreements and have them in a charitable way. Thank you, Kelsey.
Thank you. Rabbi Salzman, go ahead.
I'm Rabbi Jan Salzman, and I am rabbi at Congregation Ruach HaMakom, a Jewish Renewal affiliated synagogue in the heart of the Old North End in Burlington, Vermont. And you asked how I came to associate with my faith tradition. I believe that was the question. And I was born Jewish. My people have been Jewish for as far thousands of years. So it comes in that way. And then there also, I left the active Jewish life on my bat mitzvah when I was 13 back in 1966, and was able to find my way back into a more formal part of our religion. When I was older, I was ordained in 2010. But never stopped being Jew. Mm-hmm. But I'm a third generation Eastern European Jew, and that's a rough patch for my generation as we're really trying to making that transition from the immigrant community to being born in the United States. So that's all I'm going to say.
And last but not least, Dr. Buckley.
Kieran Buckley here, professor at Champlain College. Last Friday, I was at Daedalus Wine Bar, drinking really awesome, expensive Burgundy wine, having discussions with two women who ganged up on me, and we were trying to reconcile the idea of commandment, God's commandments, with free will. It got really loud, and the bartender was part of the discussion, and it was a search, really deep search for truth and understanding. And I've had these discussions like with Jewish friends, Muslim friends, all kinds of people. My background is, when I left Ireland, I was 18. Protestants and Catholics were killing one another in Northern Ireland. I didn't understand why Christians would kill one another, right? And so at the moment, I think I'm a recovering secularist. I moved to Germany and bought into the idea secularism is the answer. Secularism sells itself as the mediator between warring religions. I bought into the idea that the religious wars, when the Baptists and all the other Protestant groups broke off and killed one another, and I thought that's what it was about. And I like the idea, especially the American Constitution, that it's technically a secular constitution, but secularism is its own form of religion, I had to realize. And I had to realize some of the truths that religions war and kill one another is not actually true. And I realized in Northern Ireland, it wasn't Catholics and Protestants killing one another. And the Protestants there are more Presbyterian. So they'd have a more austere understanding of their faith, which flows into their lives. So you can't do anything on Sundays. You have to stay at home and worship God, right? While Catholics go to Mass and then get drunk and play soccer. Right? How do you organize a society around those two different ideas? And to realize they were never fighting over religion; they were fighting over other stuff. And as it turned out, then there was the Irish mafia and the English mafia in Northern Ireland, and politicians who sowed dissent among the various groups for political purposes, right? And so that was my background. So I bought into the whole secular idea, and I searched for the definition of religion before I came on. On Wikipedia, the definition is, well, people who abide by rules and believe in some deity. Well, I tell you, no. I'm sorry, I don't believe in any deity. And anybody who this is like secularists talking about religion is like a bit like a vegan describing a cheeseburger, bacon cheeseburger, without having tried it, right? And so this is kind of the world we're living in. And one of the statistics I was looking at too is 20 years ago, 70% of Americans went to some religious service, their own religious service, on a weekend or Sunday, once a week. Like the Pew Research said, at the moment it's down to 49%. So more than half the country doesn't observe any form of religion, right? Or religious belief. And so I went back and looked at the history of religion, because that was part of your title. Like, what are we talking about here? And so I'm from Ireland, Catholic, rediscovering the faith, understanding what it means to be Christian in the broader sense, and understanding that, for one, the Catholic Church is not a religion, right? And for somebody to come along and say we're all different religions, like the Jews are a religion or the Baptists, no, they're not a religion. Like religion is the idea. It comes from religion. Have to pronounce it right. Religare, right? It's to bind. Right? You're binding yourself to God. Right? And so we're a community. I think each of us are here a community of people who believe and who have bound themselves either to rules, but they're binding themselves to God. Right? And so part of what I want to talk about today is the secular understanding of the world, and rebut that, because I don't want to have to sit here and play nice with my religious friends here just because secularists come along and say, you see, they're going to fight over stuff. Right? Well, we're not going to kill one another. And I think we can be an example for a culture in America, right? In the same time as religion declined over the last 20 years, partisanship has risen in this country, right? Discord has risen in this country. And if you look at the actual sociologists, they tell you with the decline in religion in society and religious belief in society, society collapses. And that's where we're at the moment. And I'd like to counter like some of those secular beliefs that we as people of faith have to deal with, and show that we can have a proper discussion and show the rest of the world, so this is how you can do it.
That's awesome.
Thank you, Dr. Buckley. I think that flows really well with what we were going to address first in our agenda of
Absolutely.
talking about what faith means to each of us and what does faith represent. Anyone can answer that, of course. That's open to our speakers.
Well, I think you have to define the word faith, right? And same with the word belief. Do I believe in aliens? Do I believe in aliens? Yes. Do I believe O.J. Simpson killed his wife? Yes. Well, maybe, right? Do I believe Derek Chauvin was guilty of killing George Floyd? Right? The question is, and especially when it comes to God, do you believe in God? What's your evidence? Right? Do I believe in Martians? Right? And the lowest level of belief is possibility. Are there possible aliens out there? Yes. But what about the burden of proof? Is there a prevalence of evidence that God exists? Is it, because you're connecting it to science later on? And what about the idea of beyond reasonable doubt? Well, do we know and believe beyond reasonable doubt that God exists? Or you said, Kelsey, you said you're agnostic. Well, why don't you believe? What, do you want total surety? Right? You want beyond reasonable doubt, beyond doubt, proof that God exists? Oh, sorry, that ain't going to happen. Right? And not even in the science world, that's not going to happen. Right? And so on my personal journey, I'm trying to figure this out. Like, where am I on the faith journey? And there's a difference between our human faith. Do I believe in string theory and evolution to a certain extent? Yes. What about supernatural faith? I'm not sure if our colleagues agree with the idea that supernatural faith comes from God. And there's nothing I can do about that.
Okay, thank you, Kelsey. I'll jump in. So there's a lot of different, as Dr. Buckley indicated, there's a lot of different ways you can define the word faith. Sometimes we use that to refer to just almost as a synonym for religion, as different faiths, right? As a Christian, often I use that term to refer to, and there's biblical warrant for this in the New Testament, of the faith that has once for all been delivered to the saints. That's from the book of Jude. So there's a objective content to it. And so I would see that as consisting of something like summarized most basically in something we call the Apostles' Creed. I believe in God the Father Almighty, maker of heaven and earth, and in Jesus Christ, his only Son, our Lord, who was conceived by the Holy Spirit, born of the Virgin Mary, suffered under Pontius Pilate, was crucified, dead, and buried. Okay, I won't go through the whole thing, but that's about half of the Apostles' Creed.
You missed the last part, and the Holy Catholic Church.
That's right. Well, I'm Baptist. I had to omit that, you know. So I'm happy to talk about that phrase as well. But that's so that there's an objective content to the Christian faith. But then when we talk about subjective faith, that's usually what we mean. We're talking about our own experience of faith. And so there's different ways to think about that as well. And it's merely, I think what Dr. Buckley was getting at, and sometimes I'm believing in Martians and UFOs or whatever, is it merely wishful thinking? And so that's not what I'm talking about. When I talk about faith, I'm talking about based on objective content, am I putting my trust? So that's where faith, for me, it's about putting trust in something or someone. And that's where you get into that whole idea of are there reasons for the Christian faith, or for whichever faith it is you're coming from? Are there reasons? Do you have what are the grounds from that? So just I was raised in a what would be characterized as a Christian home family, but I had a crisis of faith in the sense that I began to discover things that I had not been taught that were in the Bible, and things that weren't in the Bible that I'd been taught. And so that created a lot of questions for me. And I'm one of those people who want to see the evidence. I'm a natural cynic. And people, maybe that's not the best way to be as a pastor. But anyway, that's where I am. I'm a cynic. I question. I want to see the evidence. And I wouldn't be a Christian if I did not think there were evidence. In fact, I told my kids just yesterday, I was reading to them from a book by C.S. Lewis called Mere Christianity. And I had a conversation with them afterwards and said, if Christianity is not true, you should reject it. If you do not believe it is true, you should reject it. Don't go through the nonsense of going to church and go ahead and live how you want to. But if you are convinced of the truthfulness of Christianity, then you should embrace it. And don't just buy into it because I'm teaching them. I want them to learn, and I want them to be Christian, right? But I want them to be convinced themselves. I cannot impose that upon them. And that's one of the things, as I talk about kind of where I am kind of in the Baptist tradition as part of historic Christianity. That's kind of one of the distinctions, because one of the things that got messed up with Christianity, and again, Dr. Buckley talked about the religious wars, but you've got you had a major problem that happened back in the 300s where Christianity and the state under Constantine got combined together. And that's an issue we're still dealing with. We still wrestle, especially in America. We wrestle with that issue, and what's the proper relationship between religion and the state. I think like Dr. Buckley said again, our Constitution, Bill of Rights do a good job of distinguishing what those responsibilities are.
What about render unto Caesar what's Caesar, and render unto God what's God?
Right?
Can the government shut down our churches? Can the church, especially during the pandemic?
Right.
No.
Exactly. So basically, what that's recognizing, there's at least two different spheres that we need to be aware of. There are some responsibilities that we have to government, and some responsibilities that we only have to God. And that's, by the way, that's probably a commonality that all of us would recognize in terms of our. There are things that we owe to the state and things that we don't, and there's demands the state can make upon us, but there's also the state cannot demand our consciences. So the Baptist movement kind of was birthed out of kind of a rejection of that kind of church-state combination in England in the 17th century, and just a recognition that an individual, kind of what I was just talking about a moment ago with my kids, that you can't make someone a Christian by holding a sword to their throat. You can make a hypocrite, you can make a false Christian, but you can't make a real Christian, because a real Christian is someone who believes in their heart. And therefore, we cannot impose that. We cannot pass legislation to make. So I'm coming from religious liberty from that perspective, right? Not because I don't really believe religion matters, or that all religions are the same, or all religions are equal, but religion cannot be forced upon another person. It has to be received individually and accepted individually. I want to make a compelling case for what I believe, just as all of the other participants will want to make a compelling case for what they believe and why you should embrace it. And that's why it's important for us to have a free society to be able to do that, and to have a civil society, not just free, but civil, where we can discuss these things like you're providing here, Kelsey. We have the opportunity to discuss these things and let people understand and respond. So anyway, I kind of got sidetracked there, but I'll stop there. Thank you.
So this is a fascinating conversation. Jews have suffered for 2,500 years by other people who thought we ought to, or more, actually, thought we should believe their way. Jews are highly allergic to belief in anything. You don't have to believe in a God even to be a good Jew, whatever a good Jew means. We are deeply, deeply invested in the 36 times that it says in Torah, in the Hebrew Bible, as you know, no longer called the Old Testament, that you should love each another as you yourself, or you are to treat the stranger as you treat yourself, etc. It says in Leviticus, "V'amarta alehem kedoshim tihiyu ki kadosh ani Adonai Elohechem." It says, God says, "I am holy, and therefore you are becoming holy." The foundation of the Jewish faith is a partnership, a covenant, but not biblically. There was this God, right? But if you look at the Hebrew Bible, how it progresses from the very beginning of the God of Genesis, as you all know, maybe you don't know, there's over 100 different names for that deity, for that God, and they're all verbs. There isn't actually a name of God, so it gets very complicated. The core name for God is a verb, Yud He Vav He, the letters. And so there is a de-emphasis on belief. Why? Because we have suffered so at the hands of others who thought we should believe in their way. Dating all the way back to the Hanukkah story, 165 BCE, when the temple was trashed by the Greeks who wanted us to worship Zeus. Judaism is very dedicated to learning how to interrupt the impulse for revenge. We have had lots of opportunities for revenge. And one of the gifts of Judaism, and one of the reasons I have become so deeply aligned with it, is that we have an ancient way of interrupting our impulse for revenge, of carrying out acts of revenge. We may feel it, but then we have ways to dissipate that. The Jewish people do not live biblically and haven't for over 2,000 years. We live rabbinically. After the fall of the Second Temple in 70 CE by the Romans and the loss, but even before that, for the destruction of the First Temple in Babel from the Babylonians in 536 BCE, we already were beginning to ask, how do we live outside of our cultic center? With the final destruction of the Second Temple, the people that Jesus was part of, actually, of course, the rabbis, the Pharisees, were already really pushing against the actual words of the Hebrew Bible and creating a new Judaism that did not rely on a single place or on a single path. It says in Torah, "Va'asun li mikdash v'shachanti b'tocham," create a sacred space for me and I will dwell with you. So there's this constant conversation of what Abraham Joshua Heschel says is cultivating a sense of awe and wonder. You don't need a sense of God. You don't have to believe in a God to cultivate a sense of awe and wonder. That I breathe in what the trees breathe out, and what the trees breathe out, I breathe in is awesome. That I wake up every morning, check my body, make sure it's still working, that is awesome. That I can be in relationship with other people, that I can have a sense of wonder about the world, leading to a deep sense of gratitude for the world. I don't have to have a subject to whom to be grateful. The challenge is that over the centuries, it's helpful to have words that indicate an object of affection. But it's a shorthand. It's a way to quickly get over the difficulty of saying the ineffable, as Heschel would say, the ineffable name. Because once you name something, you begin to limit it. And that's not the idea behind awe and wonder. So Judaism has evolved over 2,500 years to work through other people's projections on what we should be doing, how to interrupt our impulse for revenge, and to deeply, deeply live in a way that we are, as it says in this week's Torah portion, to treat the stranger the same. Well, it said this morning, we just did a bar mitzvah this morning, and the young man read that in matters of law, all people, strangers, i.e. people from other faith traditions, are to be, and everyone is to be treated with one set of justice, one set of rules. It says elsewhere in Torah, don't treat the rich differently than you do with the poor, right? So one of the things, that foundation also about Judaism, is that we can play the game of plucking out text, from anywhere, and that provides all kinds of conversation. But it's deeply, deeply important to know that we don't live biblically. And many of our brothers and sisters in the Christian world start with a living biblically, and that is their point, and God bless, that's a wonderful thing. But in this morning's Torah portion, it was eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth, to which the rabbi said, well, if you followed that, everybody would be blind and toothless. That's not what we do. You settle workman's comp issues with the value of the eye and the value of the tooth. And that if in the same Torah portion from this morning, we're in the middle of Leviticus, that if someone has done something, you're going to take them out and you have to stone them. You can't stone them unless everybody puts their hand on that person and takes part of the execution. Well, since you can't actually do that, the Torah actually says you can't carry out capital punishment. So very interesting way of understanding that text. So I think I'll stop there. But the being in relationship with a sense of awe and wonder, treating everyone as you would like to be treated, which of course, Jesus was quoting Hillel at that point, and and that there is no one name for God in the Hebrew. In English, we have one name, or sometimes we play around with it. We'll say source of blessing or whatever. But in the Hebrew Bible, there's no one name for God. And if you identify it, it's 4 letters that form a verb. Okay, so faith is a very, very different thing. Now, I'm not saying that there are some parts of the Jewish world that do believe deeply in God, but it's not a requirement. And I think I'll stop right there.
Thank you. Mohammed, would you like to add to that point?
Yeah, I would just like to say that I think in general, I feel like sometimes we live in a society where it's hard for people to openly practice religious uh, behavior because of the fact that they feel that it is not going to be accepted, or they will feel that it is frowned upon. So for that reason, a person might separate themselves from their religion and their tradition themselves itself, because of the fact that they believe that they will be more accepted if they let go of that portion of themselves. And what that does to individuals is that they will have identity crisis, because they won't know who they are, because the authentic version of themselves is being frowned upon by society, because it's becoming so secular. And this other portion of themselves that they want to portray as being more I guess progressive, is also not really the authentic version of themselves, because of the fact that there's a portion of them that is still calling back to their root. So I guess, like, growing up in a secular society, it is very hard for people of faith to really authentically practice their faith without feeling insecure.
Mm-hmm.
That's definitely a good point. It feels a little awkward, I guess you could say.
But I think it's nice. I think it's nice that the rabbi only has to love her neighbors and her friends in awe and whatever. Unfortunately, I can't do that. Jesus told us on Holy Thursday, you have to love your neighbor like I loved you. And that means dying for them. And that means more than just living in awe. And it means I have to, and not just be tolerant of your ideas, but I have to openly embrace them and talk about them. And the idea that, and the eye for an eye, I get it. I'm supposed to turn the other cheek. Right? I'm not supposed to just take another. I got to do more than just be nice to you and be in awe. And when we're talking about education, it's as Dr. Weaver said too, it's about educating people to think for themselves, but also, if there is a God, do we not owe God something? And can I just turn my back and say there's no God? Right? Well, I'm agnostic. I don't care. I think I'm going to become Jewish. It just seems nice, right? And I'm Catholic. And I'm supposed to go to church like once a week, and I'm supposed to confess my sins. Right? You don't have any sins. Right? If I sin, if I lie, if I beat my wife, if I do whatever, like, really, right? And so we have the whole idea of original sin, but also the idea of the positive idea of human dignity, right? That each human is created in the likeness and image of God, right? This is what Genesis says. And man and woman, he created them. That's one of the discussions I was having last week at Daedalus. Like, what does it mean to be created man and woman, especially in the current culture, created by God as man and woman? Does it mean I'm missing something and you have to complete me, or you're missing something? And what I'm realizing, the awesome idea is, no, we're both created perfectly. And it's not 1 + 1 = 2. It's 1 + 1 = something awesome, like infinity, something positive, right? And now I'm hearing my female students saying, "Oh, well, we're oppressed by the patriarchy." Really? That's a wrong understanding of the patriarchy. It's a wrong understanding of society. and the Christian understanding, and how I understand the biblical story in that too, is that in the beginning, like God created us to be awesome. Right? Then there was the fall, of course, and you end up having stuff going on in society. But the idea that we have human dignity and value as a human being, not because what you do or who you are, who your parents are, or whatever else, but the mere fact that you're human from conception on, that you have value, right? That you're worth, that God created you. And that's what changed Western civilization and Western society. And that's
So
what.
if I may interrupt, because there were two creation stories in Genesis.
Yes, I know. Yeah, but it's still.
But the first one was an androgynous being.
Well, that's not how we understand it.
The second one, so there's two different stories in Genesis 2.
So we understand that God didn't create an androgynous being, but he created man and woman, right? And together, man and woman complement one another. It's
right. Well, that's a later spin. So the rabbis understand it as an androgynous being.
Yep. Yep.
And it is also, we don't have original sin, for which I am delighted. So imagine an entire faith tradition built on the goodness of human beings without sin.
So that's
when we leave quite a lot. In fact, in the Zohar, the basic Jewish mystical text, it talks about when Adam, the human, the earth being, and Chava, the mother of all life, in this mythic realm, leave the Gan Eden, leave the garden. The Jewish perspective is we left being a proto-human by exercising free will, and now we were fully human. And in the Zohar, it describes how Adam himself rolled a boulder. I mean, this is fanciful thinking, but rolled a boulder to block the way back to Garden of Eden.
But the idea of sin,
very different. There's a very different perspective on the nature of the human being.
But the idea,
different faith.
But the idea of sin, when we talk about the nature of human being, the idea of sin says that humans, and it deals with the idea of human and human depravity, like, and you see it in the world. We're not all good. We're created.
Jews don't have a concept.
We have
May I finish? You interrupt people a lot, so let me stop you for a moment. So Jews, the word in the Hebrew Bible for what gets translated as sin, which is a Greek word, is chet. And it's associated with the word for arrow. And it's understood as I meant to be doing this, but I kind of got off track. And so now teshuva, which we practice a lot, is to get back our arrows aligned in where we're supposed to go. But we say every single morning, Eloheinu shamash natata bi tahorati. The soul that is in me is pure. There is nothing in the Jewish tradition that says you have a damaged soul. And that is a really profound, different place to start with. It's not that we don't screw up. It's not like people don't do wrong. The Hebrew Bible and all laws are filled with noting that the human beings are constantly a disappointment, but what's the overlay? Is it sin, or is it making the decisions we make based on a lot of so it's Judaism is not Christianity. It's deeply not Christianity. It's much closer to Islam, but it's also not Islam. And so and I think it's really important for especially you, Mr. Buckley, to be careful about making declarative statements.
Like why?
Because you don't have the truth. Nobody does. And so when you speak in a way that says you must, we did, it's like whoa, that's exactly the frame of reference that causes me to have an allergic reaction. So I'll stop talking here, but there's no one way to do any of this. We're all working with what we got. That's all I'll say right now. Thank you.
But we have more than when you have sin, we have redemption, and the idea of redemption.
Right.
So I will step in where angels here to tread here.
Yeah.
So I appreciate that. I appreciate Rabbi Salzman sharing, and certainly the if you speak about, as Baptists, sometimes we speak about persecution that has been experienced in the past, mainly speaking in terms of 17th century English context. No one has. I'm not even going to bring that up. I just brought it up, but I'm not bringing it up in the context of, in the Jewish context, but in terms of what the Jewish people have experienced. And so I understand what she's saying in terms of an allergic reaction to these kinds of declarative, seemingly dogmatic statements. However, I would say we all are making, even as we make statements, we all make declarative statements in a sense, like she says, as you said, Rabbi, there's no original sin, that kind of thing. Obviously, you're speaking out of your tradition in terms of understanding the thing. So, and I take it as Dr. Buckley speaking out of his tradition. Are you coming from a Catholic perspective, Dr.
Yes,
Buckley? Okay. Yes. And obviously, I'm coming out of a perspective, and the Imam's coming from his perspective. So we're speaking out of our statements and out of our belief systems in terms of what we believe is truth, and we have a disagreement about that, and we have disagreement between one another, and that's okay for us to have those disagreements. So I appreciate this forum to be able to express that. I like how Lewis talked about this. C.S. Lewis talked about, but when he was an atheist, he had to believe that all religions were wrong. But when he became a Christian, he was actually becoming more liberal or progressive. He uses the term liberal or progressive in the sense that now he no longer has to believe that all religions are wrong. Before, he had to think that all the most people who'd ever lived had been wrong on the most important question of what it means to have a relationship, who we are and what we are in relationship to our Creator. But when he became a Christian, he was able to take a more liberal view. And he said, it's kind of like in arithmetic. There's, each of us believe we have the right answer, so to speak. But it's possible to get the wrong answer. And there are some answers that are closer to right than others. But where people of faith would have agreement, this would be a point of commonality for most of us, would be that we actually believe there is such a thing as arithmetic. There is something for us to discuss here. And we would disagree maybe about where the answer comes out, but we do agree, I think, largely, and Rabbi Salzman may push back on that a little bit, but that there is a question that we're looking at in terms of who God is and what our relationship is with this God. And so this, the problem that we have as human beings, and I think what makes, this would be one of the arguments that I would say for Christianity, would be that Christianity takes into account the world as it actually is, a world in which human beings are capable of tremendous goodness and greatness and works of art and beauty, and so many tremendous things in our world, but also human beings are capable of tremendous evil. And the way we understand that, of course, looking at the Hebrew scriptures, which we learn from, is that we were created in the image of God. That explains the creativity and everything that's good that we see in humanity comes from the fact that we are made in the image of God. However, something has happened between Genesis 1 and today. Because I look in the mirror and I look at my own life and I don't see at the end of Genesis 1, God looks over everything that he had made, including humanity, and he says it's very good. And I look at the newspaper and the television and even frankly in the mirror, or I see my image here on the screen, it's not very good, everything that I see. And so something has happened between that very good beginning and where we are now. And what Christians understand about that is that human sin is what has happened, and that we have rebelled against our good creator's good designs for us. And in our rebellion against that, we have not only rebelled against God, but we've separated ourselves from him in such a way that we're no longer able to rule the world in the way that we were created to. And again, that's what we see as we look at this world that's really messed up with wars and even more. I mean, we can take it globally or think very personally, but things are really messed up in this world. But the good news that Christianity brings to that bad news is that the God who created us in his image that we've rebelled against hasn't left us in that state, but he has a plan actually to recover and restore what has been lost. Right. And he's taken the initiative. And, you know, that's going to sound like a Baptist preacher, okay, but I'm just explaining historic Christianity in terms of how this has been understood, is that God has taken the initiative. And we believe in one God. We share that with Islam and with the Jewish faith. We hold one God. So we would agree with the Shema of Deuteronomy 6:4. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is one. And yet we believe that the Christian scriptures, what I call the New Testament, reveal that this one God has always existed as three distinct persons, not three gods, but one God in three distinct persons, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, and that the Father has eternally begotten the Son has been eternally begotten, the Holy Spirit has been eternally proceeding from the Father and Son. The Son, the second person of the Trinity, took on human flesh, entered into this messed up world as a human, fully God, lived a completely sinless life, and then took the punishment that we deserve as breakers of the law, and then rose from the dead to prove that he was victorious over death, and through death defeated the power of death. And so we point people to believe in Jesus. Now, when we talk about the facts and the evidences, Christians will want to point, not all Christians, this Christian will want to point to evidence. I wouldn't ask anyone to believe simply because I said it, or to take, sometimes people talk about take a blind leap of faith. I don't want you to take a blind leap of faith. I want you to keep both eyes wide open. I want you to examine the evidence. Just like I said to my kid, I don't want my kids to believe simply because I say it.
Well, I have a question for you. Can you be a Christian without believing in Jesus?
What's that?
Can you be a Christian without believing in Jesus?
But it depends on how you define the term Christian. So the way I can define it all the different ways. So broadly, you know, there's a Christian tradition that people can be a part of, where they might affirm, you know, kind of that objective content that I talked about. They might be able to recite the Apostles' Creed and the Nicene Creed and, you know, all these creeds, and yet not have personal faith or trust themselves. So that person, in a real broad sense, would be considered Christian. And then there are others that you might say, well, they follow the teachings of Jesus, and, you know, they show love to neighbor. And in that sense, we want to call them Christian because they act like what we think a Christian should act like, which a Christian should be someone who imitates Jesus, right? So who tries, you know, in kind of a technical sense, kind of in a I'll use a kind of evangelical sense. If you can, I know it's really hard to think of evangelicals without thinking political, which I eschew and hate all those political connotations. But if you think in terms of evangelicalism, in terms of a historical phenomenon, if you think that's going to be more what it means to be a Christian is more about someone putting their personal faith and trust in Jesus as the Son of God, as the Messiah, as the one who actually lived that sinless, in the way that I described just a moment ago, lived the sinless life, died, rose again, and because of that, I can receive forgiveness of my sins and hope of eternal life because of that. So that
okay, so I want to make two. I want to make 2 points.
Technical, specific sense, and then there's kind of broader senses, and so depending on what you're talking about, yes.
Yeah. Okay. So there's something very interesting. The Hebrew Bible never, ever, ever describes God as good. It's not there. God may say things are good, but God is not described as good. God is described with other qualities: compassion, justice, fairness. I don't know, El Rachum V'Chanun, filled with grace. Erech Apayim Ukdal Chesed, who is filled with loving kindness. So the idea that God is good and people are not good, or however where you are in that spectrum, is radically not from the Jewish perspective, because God is never described as good. God does things. God behaves like a really spoiled 2-year-old quite often, who makes a creation and then goes ahead and destroys it, right? And so by the end of the Deuteronomy, what you see is from a God of Genesis, very involved, to the God of Deuteronomy, which we know was written later with the book of Joshua. It was not written at the same time as the other campfire tales. Suddenly God's standing at the door waving goodbye, and is not hardly in the whole book of Deuteronomy in an active way, because it's Moses' soliloquy. So again, there are a lot of places where we're in commonality, but Jesus was also a Jew. So that's kind of an interesting question all over the place. So I have to actually leave early. So I don't want to, but I think it's really important for all of us to not make declarative statements, because other faith traditions hold a very different engagement with the foundational texts that the three Christianity, Islam, and Judaism share.
So can I say something?
Sure, of course.
Because you just shut me out of the discussion. You're setting rules here that you're not allowed to set rules. I'm sorry, we're having a discussion among equals, and you come along and you call me out, you single me out, and now I'm shut out. It's because of your misinterpretation of the word sin. I'm sorry, you don't get to make the rules. This is a discussion among equals.
But all I was saying, my friend, was that in Judaism, we don't translate the word.
Now you won't let me talk, right? Yeah.
Go ahead. All I was saying is that in Judaism, we don't translate it as the word sin.
And you didn't let me explain. The Catholic Church understands the Jewish definition of it, and sin means, like you say, and like an arrow falling off the path. That's what it means, and it's the path towards God.
No.
That's what hindsight. That's what Jesus teaches us, and it through the lens of Jesus. And so you asked the question about Christians. There are some Christians out there who believe Jesus is a nice dude. There's some Christians who believe Jesus just is the Messiah. There's some people who actually believe that Jesus is the Son of God, and He reveals a new face of God, right? And not the God that you understand, but this new loving face of God that's true, right? You don't have to believe it, but that's Christianity, and that's what the Christian, the actual Jesus believes or says. And so the question is Jesus just a dude, or is He actually God? And does He actually go back and reinterpret what we call the Old Testament, right? And we say He fulfills it.
Well, and I think that you bring up a very, really important point, because there are different ways to understand the Hebrew Bible, and where the delicacy comes in is a supersessionist perspective, that one definition replaces another, and that is a real crux of a lot of bad history. But hearing how, I want to know how Jesus works in your life. I absolutely want to know that. And I also want to interrupt.
Oh, I don't mind interrupting. Sorry.
How it gets misinterpreted.
So I really like it. I really like talking to you, right? But I'm wondering when we're having these kind of discussions, and I find it when I'm having discussions too, I'm not dealing with the dogma. I'm dealing
Mhm.
with how, and this is what G.K. Chesterton says: people don't hate the church; they hate what they think the church is. Or even
Mhm.
the same with Judaism. I think they don't hate Jews as such, but they hate what Jews and Christians stand for.
Mhm.
And I think we need to separate, well, I'm trying to separate that out and say, well, this is what the word actually means. And I like your vision of humanity, but I also like the Christian vision of humanity, the idea, especially the idea of equal dignity between men and women. I think we need that more than ever in current society, right? And especially when we're dealing with racism. Like racism has no place in Christian, or I think even our Jewish thinking and our thinking, right? If I see somebody, and if I see you, I'm talking to you, I don't see you as Jewish, I see you as an intelligent woman who has a faith and a background. Or if I see somebody who's black or white or blue or whatever, I tell you, I only became white when I came to Vermont. I wasn't white in Europe.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Mm.
I'm wondering if we as people of faith could shine light on that understanding, and then the idea. And I'm going to cite you in class too, and I talk about I teach in class in the fall about your understanding of the human being awe and seeing awe in the other person. Like I think that's what Christianity is fundamentally about. And I think that's how God sees us as well. It doesn't see us as the fallen person. And when we were arguing about the commandments last week, it was, well, is God commanding us? I can go and kick your butt. Or is God, when he gives us commandments, is he more like your mother telling you to wash your hands before dinner? Right? Is it that more gentle approach? And the idea that the commands are more instructions for a good life, and to help us deal with suffering. How do you deal with suffering in life and inequality, like real injustice?
Mhm.
How do you explain that to yourself or to others?
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
These are the deep questions that I think we all can find a common, actual common approach. And I think without religion, without faith, you're not going to find that proper approach.
Mhm.
How do you deal with suffering? How do you explain suffering?
That's a big one, of course.
Okay, sorry. Okay,
Every question.
yeah.
So I think this is a good time to move into our question and answer portion of this. And I want to urge some of the people who haven't spoken yet in the audience to kind of ask the questions to our speakers or our Kelsey and I, to, if you want to know something, if you have a question about something that was said, to voice your opinion.
And I'd also like to hear a little bit more from our Muslim brother here about what he might have to say to all this.
Is he gone?
Oh, he actually had to leave.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so I apologize for that.
I did notice that, and I did want to, while we were talking about different perspectives on Jesus as a person and Jesus as a Messiah figure and so forth, I did notice at that point that he had disconnected, and I wanted to bring into the discussion, although I am not a Muslim myself, but I feel it has to be brought into the discussion, that in the Muslim faith, as I understand it, Jesus is one of many prophets.
Mhm.
So there's
Right.
definitely that commonality of Jesus as, I don't want to say a person, because then I feel like I'm labeling it as a personhood in the definition of Jesus, but as a figure, he exists in all these different many faiths, but in so many different roles.
I'd like to extend that actually to Adin, knowing that you're a Muslim. Adin, I think that you can speak a little bit more to the Muslim perspective on this.
We can't hear you.
I'm hard to hear you. Oh, hey, Mohammed's back. Uh, so basically, what we want to know is like, what is the understanding of Muhammad being a prophet, or for other people, like, in Christianity, him being like non-existent. So, what is our understanding of Islam of Prophet Muhammad? Also,
he's not a god, he's just a human being. And
We can
also,
barely hear you. Could you get closer to your mic, please?
um, can you hear me now, or
Yeah.
can you hear me? I might have to switch devices.
That's okay.
Yeah.
No problem.
So, anybody else that has a question, feel free to ask that question.
Muhammad, since you just reconnected, we were talking about the different roles of Jesus in different faiths, him being a Messiah, him being just a person. And at the time, we weren't sure if you were able to come back. So I mentioned that in Islam, Jesus is seen as one of many prophets. So we were kind of hoping for some expansion on that from someone within the faith.
All right. Yeah. So Jesus is just he's a prophet within our religion. Um, he is still a very significant figure. He is very much important. He's one of the main prophets of our religion. However, we don't consider him to be the son of God because we believe that God himself does not have any kids. I mean, if we want to talk about like generally like the kids, we are all the kids of God, but we don't think he has any biological kids or any other type of kid in any sense except the sense that we can all say that we're kids of God. So that's what we believe about God, about Jesus. But still, we respect him. He is a prophet within Islam, and I guess that's really it. Does anybody have any particular questions regarding like his role in Islam?
Well, I'm actually interested in what the Islamic perspective is. We were talking a lot about sin, and I was wondering how that word plays in your tradition.
Yeah, completely. I think it's very important to um. Do you guys hear like an echo?
Yes.
I think it's good now, right? Okay, I think it's very important to just explain what that means in our religion. So we do believe that there is a purpose to life. We believe that every human being is here for a reason. They're not just here to just live and do whatever they want to do. But they can because they have free will. But they can also fulfill their role as a human being because there are definitely rules and regulations, and that's where sin comes into the equation. Because if you don't follow the rules and regulations, then obviously you're gonna have to pay for it. Just like we have laws here, in this world. I guess when you talk about Islam, if you don't fulfill certain things, if you break certain rules within the religion, you're going to be held accountable for whatever you've done. It's not you're not going to be misrepresented. Matter of fact, you're going to be asked after you die, do you feel that you have been misrepresented? And you yourself will say, no, I have not been misrepresented. So no one will misrepresent you, nor will you be held accountable for something you haven't done. It's going to be completely transparent. There's going to be evidence, and it's going to be very much live stream. So to the point in which like you will be seeing the sin that you have committed, so that there's no room for debate. You can't say, "Oh, I didn't do it." Well, who knows? Like your hand, for example, might be saying, "This is the hand that you use," or your leg might be saying that this is the leg that you used to go to this area and committed this X amount of sin. So it's going to be very much transparent. There's going to be no room for really debate, but that is only to say that you will have a fair advantage, and you will get whatever you deserve. Whether that is a good thing or bad thing depends on the way you live.
I think it's really important to understand that being a Muslim, I can also attest to that, which Muhammad said just now. But there is an understanding that you will be held accountable for every single sin that you commit at an atom's weight, meaning even littering, something as simple as that, will be something that you'll have to answer for. But also, we understand that Allah is the most merciful. So when you are being judged on the day of judgment, you're being judged in terms of Allah's mercy, meaning nobody is going to be admitted into paradise based off of their actions, because we are all flawed on the base level as a human being. You know, we're going to be admitted into paradise based on God's willingness to forgive the sins that we've committed, and that's based on your intentions, a pure heart, and things of that nature, rather than what you've actually done to achieve some kind of payback for the life that God has given you, and etc.
And I would also like to add, if you guys can hear me.
Yes.
Oh, okay, good. All right. So, talking about the sins, I just would like to make, if you guys didn't mention it, just to include that when it comes to sin, no one can bear anybody else's sin. No one. So, like when it comes to like, for example, Christianity, Jesus, when they say Jesus died for our sins,
Mhm.
for us it's not like that. It's he can't die for somebody's sins. That's that person's sin. No one can bear anybody else's sin at all. I just want to make sure to keep that clear.
Is there anyone who disagrees with that wants to kind of share their point and talk about that?
Yes.
I disagree with it.
I figured there would
I
be.
saw you nodding over there.
Thank
This
you.
is where
Thank you.
Judaism and Islam is very tight together. That's we
Oh,
join
yeah.
in that. Yeah.
We appreciate
you.
that, Rabbi Salzman.
Thank you. Can I thank you, gentlemen, all three of you, for sharing, and very beautifully stated. And I've loved learning about Islam recently and trying to overcome a lot of stereotypes, and that there's a lot of, as you all know, I'm sure better than I do, a lot of misrepresentations, as there are of all of our faiths in different communities. And so I've enjoyed reading from the Quran itself, and or a translation of it. I know it's not the I have learned enough to know that's not the real thing, but thank you all for sharing. And I think there's commonality in this sense, and your understanding of sin is much closer to a Christian understanding, I think, than what Rabbi Salzman expressed a moment ago. There is accountability, and maybe she has more to say about that. I'm not sure, but just in terms of the conversation that we've had so far. So I agree with that 100%, and I appreciate also, is it with Adon, sharing about that no one else can bear anyone else's sin in Islam, and that is a key distinction, obviously, with Christianity. That's one thing that most people know, that Christians believe that Jesus died for our sins. That's one of those things that's really repeated. Yes.
Sorry. Just to clarify again, I mean, just to add on to it for clarifications. No one is the bearer of anybody else's sins, but somebody's sin can affect somebody, somebody else. It can affect somebody else who hasn't made that sin yet. So just another.
Yeah. No.
Yeah.
Good. Thank you. So in the Christian faith, what we believe, all of those things you guys said about sin in terms of the seriousness of it and God holding each of us accountable. And we believe that since God is just and good, sorry, Rabbi, since God is just and good, he must punish all those sins. He can't go against his character. His character, he can't contradict his character. He's not like our grandparents. When you stay with your grandparents and your parents come to pick you up, and they ask how were they today, and they say, oh, they were perfect little angels, and we, of course, we weren't. They just kind of sweep our misdeeds under the rug, so to speak. We don't think God can do that because it's against his very character, his very nature. Of course, we also believe that God not only is holy and just, but also loving and good. And I think sometimes a misconception of Islam is not recognizing that Muslims believe in the mercy of Allah. And I appreciate you sharing that. And obviously that phrase, most merciful one, I believe is used often in the Quran to describe Allah. So, but since we believe this about God, that he's so good and holy that he has to punish sin, our only hope is that there would be some way of someone else bearing our sin. If we're going to escape the punishment ourselves, our hope, and I'm saying our hope, not in the sense that we hope so we made this up, although that's would be some people's perspective of what Christianity is, right? Like a hopeful, this is what we've decided to come up with. But instead, we believe this is what actually God has revealed in terms of in the scriptures, the New Testament scriptures, Christian scriptures, that God has actually taken the initiative. And I think this is what sets Christianity apart from other religions of the world. Other religions are about us trying to somehow appease and satisfy God ourselves, whereas Christianity says God has taken the initiative to solve the problem that we have himself. And he actually entered this world and became one of us. And, I'm not going to go through that whole thing again. I'm not using this to preach a sermon. I get to do that tomorrow. But that Jesus is, as the Son of God, fully human and fully God, was able to bear our sin. We owed a debt as humans who've rebelled against God that we owed, but we could not pay. And so the God man, and I'm sorry, I know that sounds blasphemous and to both their Jewish and Islamic friends, but I'm just telling you what I believe and what Christians believe, that the God man was able to fully bear our sins on the cross and take the punishment that we deserve. And that's what he actually did. And so anyway, that's what my hope is, and that's what the Christian hope is. And I know that's different from what many of you or most of you believe on this panel, but I appreciate you allowing me to share that.
Can I add just one little thing to that? The question becomes practically, what happens if you're down and you're on the sinful path? Can you save yourself and get back onto the right path on your own?
Of course.
And so what Christianity, what Christ teaches us, and the way Christians understand is Christ is helping us through his grace and through his help to actually get back on the path. And so if you're an addict, if you're depressed, if you're down and can't find your own way out, who do you turn to? Yeah. Right? And that's what Christianity offers. You might say you don't need it, you do alcohol or drugs, everything, that's fine. But Christianity says Christ is offering to help us out of that sinful life and get us back onto, as Rabbi says, back on the arrow path, get it back on the path to God. Right? So we don't have to do it on our own. That's the idea behind it.
So I want to say two things. One is, what is the impact, of course, of having an afterlife or not having an afterlife? So in the Hebrew Bible, there's no afterlife. And it begins to be developed when the Jews come in contact with the Greeks. And the idea of an afterlife, the world to come, Olam Haba, begins to seep its way into the Jewish mindset. And there are times in our history when we've adopted the idea that you suffer after you die. There are times because we're living amongst mostly Catholics during those times. There are other times in our history where the world that's coming at you is the world that's coming at you right now, and that we don't pay attention to the afterlife because we don't know what's going to be. So we got to take care of our stuff in this life. There's a process called teshuvah that we practice every day, and more monumentally for the high holidays. And it is getting back on that path. The methodology for that is that you have to go apologize to someone that you've wronged. And they can refuse you. And then you go back to them with 2 witnesses. I really, really am sorry that I did this to you. And you refused. And third time, I'm really, really, really sorry. And I brought these witnesses, and I'm really sorry that I screwed you over. And if the person still won't forgive you, you are absolved of what you did because you've tried to apologize. In other words, it's a human to human contact. It's not to say, I'm not trying to say on any level that there are many Jewish people in the Jewish faith that is deeply grounded in having a relationship to God. It's not my path, but it's absolutely part of Judaism. You just look at the Psalms, right? The Psalms are, all can be summed up in 2 words, please and thank you. Please help me get these enemies out from under me because I'm scared. Or wow, what an amazing hallelujah day, right? So that all prayer actually could probably be summarized in those 2 words. But the impact of having an afterlife and having to deal with looking at how I've lived my life after I die never takes large currency in the Jewish tradition. The afterlife it actually is conceived over the centuries in a lot of different ways. But we don't have that most of the time. And I'm saying, of course, it showed up at some times, especially in the medieval times. We don't have the idea that there's suffering for how we lived. There is your impact on how you live is while you're alive. Again, not trying to say that there aren't concepts of the afterlife, but that's the general thrust. Okay. I also want to say that as a Jew, for me to say Judaism says is impossible because there's literally 2,500 years of Judaism in its, we think of it more of a verb. We Jew, how do you Jew? I Jew this way, you Jew that way, right? There's Eastern European Jews, there's Arabic Jews, there is Indian Jews, there are African Jews, there are Chinese Jews, there are Spanish Jews, and each pocket of those geographic pockets do have a different spin on Judaism. The times that we came into beautiful contact with Islam, where they weren't oppressing us so badly, we were just kind of second-class citizens before the Catholics arrived. It was the highest part of our philosophy. It's introduced to Judaism, and it blows the lid off of Judaism in the 1200s, 1300s, 1400s. So I also want to be very careful when I say Jews think or Judaism is, because I actually can't. An Arab Jew has an Iraqi Jew, a Moroccan Jew, has a radically different understanding of what it is to be a Jew. I mean, there's commonality. I'm not trying to make too stark of a position here. So, and just like in my understanding of Christianity too, there's lots of different ways to Christian, and there's lots of ways to Jew. And the question becomes, at what point does it get too mushy, right? Then it doesn't become anything. So
I have a question.
Yeah.
For Islam, yes, like what you mentioned, Islam kind of has that separation, that difference in between each other. But there's only one thing that's like slightly different, which is like when we do come to a point where we are in disagreement or where we don't meet the same paths, we use like the source, which is the Quran. And so we basically, that's like the root, that's like the place where we all come to. If there's people debating, if they're fighting, oh, this is Shia, this is Sunni, this is Wahhabi, this is Salafi or whatnot. We come directly to the Quran, and then we tell the person, do you see that? Yes, I do see that. So what do you got to say about it? I guess it is the same, like, I guess we shouldn't argue about that. So when we bring the book in front and, it shows that, hey, we are the same, we believe in the same thing, but even though we brought the book forth as in like a way to stop the disagreement, if it continues, then we just end it with you be your way and to me be mine.
Mm-hmm.
But usually to throw all the fights and disagreements away, we come to the source. So where is the source for yours? Because there's
That's a
always a source.
beautiful question. The source is the rabbinic understanding that the most important thing is not the last answer, but the next question. We use the Torah as a springboard. It's written in a language where the words don't mean the same as what we think. There's biblical Hebrew, there's rabbinic Hebrew, there's medieval Hebrew, there's modern Hebrew. It's a really old language. And sometimes the conversation is, we don't know what it says because we don't understand what the word is.
Right.
And so the Talmud is filled with conversations about just trying to fit. The Talmud is the post. It's the salon that has been going on since 586 BCE. It's the rabbinic conversation about what Torah means. That's a one sentence definition. Jews live Talmudically, they live rabbinically. They don't live biblically, as I've said before. So you point out something really beautiful. I can be having an argument, and I can bring the Torah to my adversary, and we will then get into an argument about what the text says. And that is Judaism.
And that's what I mean. And
one of the reasons it's Judaism is because we have rarely in our history had the political or military supremacy to impose our will on others. And we're usually just trying to figure out how those other people could be such awful people and how can we respond to them. So now, of course, with Israel and Palestine, it's a very different situation. And that's what makes many of us Jews crazy about what's going on over there, because we are not acting in a way that shows a lot of compassion about a lot of things. So that's a whole other conversation. So when you say you show someone the Quran, there's an assumption, or the New Testament, the writings, there's an assumption that the words, you can actually understand what the words mean. Judaism delights in the dialectic of discovery of the dialectic, because anytime you say something, I come up with the next question. That is what we share. Then within Judaism, there are different sects of Judaism that approach the text in unique ways. But even within those sects, the thrust of the tradition is coming up with the next question. So does that, and I'm painting broad strokes here, obviously. I could give you a 6-week class on what I just said. Okay, but we're not going to do that. And so it's really different. It's a very different thing,
Yeah.
There is no one book.
People do study religion their whole lives.
Yeah.
Right.
It's very difficult to grasp everything about every religion because people are so different in their nature.
Yeah.
We are approaching the end of this meeting, and to wrap it up, I would like the speakers to kind of just give a 1 or 2 minute summary and wrapping up statements, concluding how they feel and the takeaways and what things that they would like to kind of just speak on to wrap things up. And I want to start with you, Dr. Buckley.
I enjoy these kind of discussions, and I'm glad that people didn't hold back their reserve. And I like your Rabbi passion and searching for truth. That's what we're all about. And you take the Quran and you're trying to understand the truth, right? As a Catholic, I have it a little bit easier because I have the catechism. That's why when I make these decorative terms, we spent 2,000 years discussing all this, and greater minds than I have discussed it. I can open up a book. I got the Bible, but we still have to figure it out, right? And part of life is, and I'm glad I'm dealing with people of faith here. And I think the message to people who don't have faith yet Kelsey. Is an invitation to participate in this broader discussion, and not to just do it academically, but to go deeper and discover this supernatural faith, like this relationship to God. And I think we have different understandings or different concepts of God. That'd be an interesting discussion to have. What are our concepts of God, and how do we see that? We've already seen that here, and to develop those kind of deeper discussions. And because I think it feeds our humanity. Yeah.
Thank you.
Feel free to just chime in if.
So we are all, many of us in the world of the faith workers here, we are constantly being confronted with, I'm not religious, but I'm spiritual.
Right.
And yeah, which God bless, right? As they say, right? And so part of my personal path is to focus on that spirit. And as the Rebbe who began Jewish Renewal said, tell me about the God you don't believe in. I don't believe in that God either. So let's get going. Let's start talking, right? So the one of the greatest fallouts from the movement of the rational movement, the intellectual movement, starting in the 1700s, was what fell out of that conversation is the spiritual facet of our lives.
Yes.
And language to describe the spiritual facets of our lives, which
Yes.
is why I steep a lot of my study in the mystical texts, because they invite me to set aside my rational mind in order to open up and give language to the parts of me and us that is spirit. And so we have many, many, many different ways to talk about that spirit, that spark within us, the light, the candle that is in our hearts. Every faith tradition talks about that. And so it is always a pleasure to dance around that question. How is it that I can be spiritual but not religious? And I say, yeah, bring it on, because what's really important is that anybody who's trying to give language and vocabulary to the ineffable, to the language and vocabulary to that which cannot be described, is really walking a very difficult but holy path. And holy in Hebrew is kadosh, right? Kodesh, like a way to separate yourself a little bit from the day-to-day and elevate ourselves to explore all the different facets of what it is to be a human being. And part of that is a spiritual facet. And so thank you for this chance to play with you guys.
Thank you.
Well, thank you for this opportunity, and I really love this discussion. Loved hearing and learning about each of your perspectives. I would just point back to this idea that there is a God is one that our different faiths hold in common, and as we come to think about that. Many people who reject an understanding of God reject God because of the amount of injustice that's in the world and the amount of terrible things that we see in the world, and how can there be a good God? But we simply have to ask ourselves this question: is where does that concept of good and just come from? And what are we comparing this world to? And so if we question the existence of God based upon the presence of injustice, it's actually a self-defeating argument, because then we realize this concept of justice comes from somewhere outside of us. And where did that come from? And I would argue that it's put into us and built into us by our Creator. And that's why we recognize that things are wrong in the world. Now we begin that journey of discovery to try to understand who is this God? And how can we know him? Has he spoken to us? And there are faith traditions, 3 represented here, that have an answer to that question. That have a question, that whether it's the Torah or the Quran or the Christian scriptures, that there's a answer to that question. And we go to that. If God has spoken, if the God who created us has spoken, then what has he said? Is there evidence that this book is authentic? Has it stood the test of time? It can be. I want to encourage people, like Rabbi Salzman. Our perspectives are a little bit different in terms of asking these questions, but the Christian faith is not afraid of questions. I want to encourage you to question and examine, look at the evidences, look at the text. If it's not true, if there's no evidence, if you're not convinced, then reject it. And but if you discover, as so many have, that there is truth, that the God who made us has actually spoken and revealed himself in human history in a way that he can be known and that we can be in a relationship with him, then heed that. So again, thank you for the conversation. Thank you. I just really appreciate this college, which is functioning really. You guys are functioning not just as a college, but really as a university, in the sense that you're allowing a diversity of views and true diversity to be expressed and celebrated. So thank you for that.
So I would just like to say thank you all for being here. Appreciate it. I just want to say that if God does not exist, and I'm always down to obviously have a discussion about that, then that would mean that obviously we came from a natural event, and so that would bring up another question: is what caused that natural event? Then we're going to say it's another natural event. Then we're going to say what caused that natural event. Then it's just going to be a whole infinite natural event. Yeah. So I guess then you would say the origin is natural event. So then that would be the definition of God, right. Correct? Yeah. I don't think I'm going to call my God natural event. I don't know about you guys, but I'm gonna give him some other name, a fancy name, something that has just more majesty to it. But anyways. That was just the question.
Necessary existence.
That's just something that I wanted to put out there. Just like keep asking, what is the source of everything? And then if you find that source, ask yourself, what is the source of that? And just keep going. Just keep going. Don't ever stop. It might take years for you to come to some sort of reasonable conclusion, but just keep going. Even if you find that reasonable conclusion, just keep going, because the truth is all I'm asking everyone to find. Not Islam, not any particular religion, just find the truth, because that is the most important thing.
Yep.
Great words.
All right. Also, yeah, thanks for inviting me, Kasim. It was great talking to every single person in here. Thank you very much. I would like to just add a verse from the Quran, and I think we can all agree upon this. Which is just like it's the same verse that was given to Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, which was just basically read. You just read, and it's not just read the Quran. The message behind that those verses was not just like for the Quran. It's talking about read the Torah, read the Christianity, the Bible. Also study the things in this world, the things that you may be ignorant about. So just like in general, just read, find knowledge, seek knowledge. So if we just sit around and focus on our devices, the next game or whatnot, that's I don't think that's what we're here for. That's a distraction, I feel like we're here to just, I mean, we've been given brains, and we should at least continue to use it. You know, seek knowledge. I don't know. I don't care. Science, algebra, mathematics, whatever it is, seek it. And especially, we didn't just, you know, like Mohammed just mentioned, we didn't just come out of like nowhere. You know, it's like we didn't just end up here and that's it. You know, there's got to be something behind it. There's got to be a purpose. So behind one of those purposes, I feel like it is to continue seeking knowledge.
Beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you. Yep.
I appreciate everyone who showed up tonight, and I look forward. I don't know if Kelsey agrees with me to doing this again.
Absolutely.
Awesome.
I just want to say that next time if you guys are doing it, invite me, because there's a subject that I wanted to discuss that we didn't get the opportunity to discuss, and that is gender equality, the LGBTQ community, and just faith in general.
Yep.
I just wanted to dive into that, but
That's
I guess
a great topic.
we're gonna save that for next.
Yes, we will.
It's very
My other request is that you don't do it on Shabbos.
All right.
This is when I'm not supposed to be working, but I said yes because it's a really wonderful thing to do.
Yeah.
But it's my Shabbos, so.
Okay.
Good.
So now I'm going to get on my bike. So I'll see you guys later.
Bye.
All
I want
right.
to thank you all for coming, and I want to extend a big thank you to Kasim. This was all his idea, so
Nice to see you. Woo!
this would not have happened without him.
Thanks,
Yes.
guys. Yeah.
See you all in 3 dimensions, more and more. What a joy! What a joy! Meet you for a beer.
All right. Thanks very much, guys.